a bit to the very important question that Konrad Poe in the first episode said: how can we quantify all these benefits? If we are changing our environment for the better, what is better, and how do we quantify that better?
Yeah. How do we quantify what is better for the environment?
Yeah, and for us.
Mm-hmm. And do you mean only the environment in the sense of natural environment, or
what are the parameters? What are the metrics we need to look at? That's a bit the big question for this podcast. It's going to be
okay. Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting to have a systems approach in that. It's always difficult or a bit risky, I think, to pick out one, indicator and then make that indicator the one.
Just like CO2 is the indicator for global warming, which only one. Oversimplifying the whole problem.
The whole problem with the different kind of emissions.
Yeah.
And same is actually, we have so many indicators, but behind that indicators, there's also, a larger set of principles.
Yeah.
And there, for instance, you have, for instance, these 13 principles of agroecology. There have been several changes in the principles. First it were 5, and then 11, and 15. Now it's 13. But there's like this consensus right now that there are 13 principles of agroecology. And it's interesting to see that these principles. Let's just give an example. So you have ecological principles, you have more economic principles, and you have more social political principles, and also about knowledge exchange, etc. But let's say, for instance, the ecological principle. One of the ecological principles of agroecology is to increase biodiversity above and below the ground. So both agrobiodiversity, and biodiversity below the ground. So the organic matter and the soil life,
the worms and the
bacteria. And the worms, and there we come.
The fungi.
Yeah. You're an engineer, right? You know about little animals there, that provide nutrients, and
it's not what I learned in school,
Oh, that's a pity, I think. But that, I think, is then you have an indicator. For instance, if you look at this biodiversity, you have a huge amount of things you can measure. For instance, how many earthworms do you have per square or meter or per hectare? And just that's an indicator of soil life and pollination, the amount of bees or the amount of natural enemies. That's an indicator of agrobiodiversity.
I do remember in my studies, we had to go to a forest, pick 1 square meter out, and then follow that for 3-4 weeks.
Okay.
And check out how many bugs do we measure, how many plants are there, what type of plants, and we had to do this 10 plots throughout the whole forest, something like that. That's how we would count that biodiversity, right?
Yeah, that's how you could count it, and you could compare, farms and in terms of soil life, for instance, and that's if you would make that matter. Also in policies, for instance, that would make a shift. If you would reward farmers for increasing their soil life, for instance, right now they're not rewarded a lot.
It's a big question, but for later in this podcast, how do we reward this?
Yeah,
it's more of a political, philosophical question.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah.
First, the metrics, like biodiversity is one.
Yeah, biodiversity is one. And then you go towards. For instance, another one, another important principle of agroecology is to close loops, to close nutrient cycles.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking out loud here, but a measure could be, in order to close the loops. Another principle is actually to reduce the external inputs. So to be as autonomous as possible in your farm.
To have a local ecosystem.
Yes.
A local circular economy, basically.
Yes. So to produce your own feed, to be an example of that.
Produce your own fertilizer. That's a big input in farming these days.
Definitely. So the feed and the fertilizer, they're often the water. Where do you get it from? And for instance, that's the choice between importing soy, causing deforestation in South America, versus growing your own feed. And this can be poured into an indicator. What is the percentage of feed grown in your own region? And
I like that indicator because like I've been in the vertical farming movement a lot of times, and 90% of all the companies in the scene say like we use 90% less water and half less fertilizer, this and that. But then they're still using it. And especially the fertilizer and vertical farming system, hydroponic system, is not from an organic source, but it's from a mineral source, which it's being mined basically.
So
I in that sense, I would love to see the vertical farming movement take the sustainability of their systems to a next level, where they work together with local organically produced fertilizer, where their water comes from somewhere else, or where it's like you said, a closed loop system.
Yes.
That would be great to see, because it expands the possibility of this closed loop systems to make a city more sustainable, to be part of a sustainability.
But what about urban farming systems? Can they make use of other external inputs than they do right now?
Like, you're talking about vertical farming systems?
Yeah, for instance, vertical farming. I'm interested in that.
Like I know Les Sourciers in France by Marion, and she does a lot about bioponics. So basically, but I think she still uses mineral fertilizer, because she says like the combination of both is genius, because you have the organic fertilizer combined with the mineral source, and they help each other. But I believe we can have both in cities too, because if in a city we have a lot of humans and we produce a lot of waste, which has a lot of nutrients, and if we can extract those nutrients, we have mineral fertilizer again. And combine that with organic matter, which is then used. So I think it's possible to have that combination of.
But it's searching for but it's always interesting to have these principles in place. So. The principle of reducing external inputs, for instance, and increasing the autonomy of the local. I mean, that's just, it can work out differently, in a small scale farmer in South America, or a vertical farmer in the Netherlands, but the principle remains the same. The principle is, how can we, make closed loops? How can we reduce external inputs? And I think, then the metrics come in second place. Then, what are we going to measure now? We try to follow this principle, we try to operationalize this principle, and then what are good metrics to follow up? I think the other way around might be a bit risky, when you say, we pick out this one metric, water use or something, and then this becomes the holy grail. I think that we need to think.
It's too simple.
It's just it's more complex, and there are some choices to be made. And principles are basically, like general ways of guiding your thinking and your decisions,
and describing a system with those principles.
And
measuring a system, or measuring a farm with those, or measuring a city with those principles.
That could be a step further then. And indicators can take all kinds of forms. For instance, we had this discussion in the Food Policy Council, about an indicator on, we need to have more CSAs, for instance. And it could be an indicator that we want to have, now we have, 3 or 4, and in 2025 we want to have 10. That could also be an indicator, to have more, vertical farms within the city.
The amount of
enterprises could also be an indicator. But I mean, I think it's always a collective process.
That's an economic indicator. So the first two were like more environmental indicators, biodiversity and input and output of a system. Then you have the economic part, like economic sustainability is also an important part. If your farm is not sustainable, like our farm was in Antwerp, the mushroom farm, was not financially sustainable, so we could not go on. That's the amount of food produced is also, that's an output of a system. Definitely.
Yes.
Which then in an ideal situation would like you sell the food, people eat it, and then bring fertilizer back. That would be
yeah. Well, there's some discussion about that. I think.
Yeah, there's some health safety challenges.
There's a taboo on that issue, but
it's needed to implement.
It's makes sense. Huh? I mean, if it can happen in a safe way.
Yeah, in a safe way. Safe way is very important.
Then
But it's the natural way.
For nutrients.
Yeah, it's the natural way.
And it's probably
we
natural.
And we poo, and the poo is being used as fertilizer.
That's a closed loop.
Yeah.
So, but also economic principles, I think, are important. Of course, what's the and there are a lot of indicators as well. There, I was always thinking about this. You can have these kind of growth-oriented indicators. Okay, what's the amount of broccoli produced per hectare? I'm going to increase the amount of broccoli produced per hectare, or but what about the amount of meaningful jobs per hectare, or of the amount of income added value per hectare? Often we forget about these labor indicators. And a lot of how many working hours per unit of income. And there I think we really need to think about those kind of indicators as well. It's not only about creating more food with less energy, for instance. It's not only about that. It's also about working conditions.
And this I think this is the first conversation we have on these indicators. Like Koenraad de Pauw in first episode asked, what are the numbers?
Yeah.
These are we don't have the numbers yet.
No.
But
it's more a reflection on how to think about the numbers, I guess.
Yeah, and we need I'm pretty sure there's some research out there, specifying, like you said, the 13 principles of agroecology.
Yeah.
People are measuring those.
Yeah, well, if you go further than to literature, you see that, there are several research being done that then start to develop indicators that are related to those principles.
Yeah.
But it's always, danger always, in any science is to focus on one number indicator and then do not go back to the assumptions lying behind them. Labor productivity, for instance, increased, but enormously. Labor productivity increased enormously in the contemporary food system.
But happiness declined.
Yeah, but what about happiness?
Yeah.
And if you only look at labor productivity, then you'd say we're doing a good job. And even that's questioned. I read a recent paper where they even question food productivity, labor productivity in the industrial food system.